I could see the stately ruins of a splendid country mansion. I questioned a boy who was standing on the side of the road, looking at us, half timidly, half gladly. "Tell me, child, who burnt the château over there?" "Monsieur, they did. They took everything away, all the beautiful things. They even carried everything off on big carts, and then they set fire to the house. But everything isn't burnt, and a lot of them came back again this morning with some horses, and they went on looking for things." I sent off another squad towards the château, telling them first to follow the edge of the wood and to be careful how they approached it. The men got into the wood by the spaces in the bank along the road and scattered in the thickets that dotted the side of the spur we were turning. I was thus protected on my right. I went up at a trot to the place where the road reached the plateau, and just as I was on the point of reaching it, we were met by a crowd of village folk, men, women and children coming along looking radiant. I saw some of them questioning my advance scouts and pointing in the direction of the north-east. It was the whole population of Le Charmel, and they had come out to meet us. Le Charmel is a small village that stands at the meeting of two roads, one leading towards Fismes, the other towards Frères de Tardenois. It has the appearance of hanging on to the hillside, for whilst the road to Frères de Tardenois continues to follow the plateau, that to Fismes dips abruptly at this place and disappears into the valley. The houses of Le Charmel are perched between these two roads. Thus the people of the village had a good view of the enemy's retreat, and everybody wanted to have his say about it. I turned to a tall man, lean and tanned, with a grizzled moustache, who had something still of a military air and seemed to be calmer than the others around him. From him I was able to get some fairly clear information.
"Mon Lieutenant, it was like this. They went off this morning early, a great number of cannons and horses. The artillery went straight on towards Fismes by the road. The cavalry cut across the fields and disappeared over the ridge, you see, over there on the other side of the valley. Then towards 8 o'clock some of them came back. How many? Well, 2 or 3 regiments perhaps, and some guns, and they went down towards Jaulgonne. I believe they wanted to destroy the bridge. Just as they got into the turn of the hill, pan, pan, they were fired at. But then, of course, we got back to our houses and shut them up as the guns began to fire. But when we heard no more reports, we came out again and saw them making off across the fields, like the others, and in the same direction. But it's quite possible that some of them stayed in the woods or in the farms on the other side of the forest of Riz."
He was interrupted by my non-commissioned officer.
"Mon Lieutenant, the scouts, they are signalling to you."
I galloped up to them, when they pointed out to me, at about 1,500 yards distance on the opposite ridge, a small group of cavalrymen near a stack, and, on the side of the slope, a patrol of German dragoons pacing slowly with lances lowered and stopping every now and then and facing in our direction. I took my glasses and looked carefully at the stack, and then I saw a sight which sent a shiver of joy through me. The horsemen had dismounted and put their horses behind the stack. 3 of the men then separated themselves from the rest and formed a little group. I could not distinguish their uniforms, but saw very clearly that they were looking through their glasses at us. Now and again they put their heads together and consulted the map, as it seemed. A man then came out from behind the stack on foot, and could be distinctly seen against the sky, sticking into the ground by his side a square pennon which flapped gently in the breeze. As far as I could see it was half black and half white. There could be no doubt that we were confronting a Staff. So the division was not far off. It had halted, and perhaps intended this time to fight at close quarters. I told my men what I thought, and they were overjoyed at the idea that, after all, there was a hope of realising our dream. There was not one of them who doubted that the division of the Guards had been kind enough to stop its flight, and that our brave light brigade would attack it without any hesitation and cut it to pieces. I dismounted quickly, and lost not a moment in drawing up my report. I wrote down what I had seen and what I had learnt from the inhabitants, and then called one of my chasseurs. "To the Colonel, full gallop!" At the touch of a spur the little chestnut turned sharp around and flew down the dusty road like a whirlwind. Meanwhile I carefully posted my men, threw out scouts over the château and up to the forest of Fear, and formed patrols under my non-commissioned officers. I then took my observation post under a large tree, which, to judge by its venerable look, must have seen many generations pass and many other wars. The village folk collected around me in such numbers that I was obliged to have them thrust back by my men to Le Charmel. To console them I said, "You must go away. The enemy will take you for armed troops and fire guns at you." I kept my eye upon my staff, and wished my glasses could help me to distinguish more clearly what men I had to deal with. I longed to see what they were like, to examine the faces of these haughty Reiters, who for the last 4 days had been fleeing before us and always refusing a real encounter. I fancied that among them might be that Rittmeister, with the bulging neck and pink cheeks, who after the orgy of that night at the Château de Condé had left behind him the cap that I had found hanging from the chandelier in the dining room. How I longed to see the brigade debouch and to receive instructions from the Colonel! I had not long to wait. My messenger soon came back, trotting up the road from Jaulgonne. But the instructions were not what I had expected. I was to stay where I was until further orders, and to continue to observe the enemy and keep a look-out in his direction. I learnt some details from the man. The greater part of the infantry had already crossed the bridge, and there was also some artillery on this side of the river. As he said this, a clatter of wheels and chains caused me to turn my head, and I saw behind us, in the stubble fields of the plateau, 2 batteries of 75s taking up positions. Aha! We were going to send them our greetings, then a salute to the pompous General over there and to his aide-de-camp, the stiff and obsequious Rittmeister, whom I imagined to be at his side. I looked on gaily with my chasseurs at the laying of the guns. How we all loved that good little gun, which had so often come up to lend us the support of its terrible projectiles at critical moments. And those good fellows the gunners loved it too, the men we saw jumping nimbly down from their limber, quickly unhitching their piece, and pointing it with tender care towards the enemy. Standing on a bank, with his glasses to his eyes, the officer in command gave his orders, which were passed from man to man by the markers. And then suddenly we heard 4 loud, sharp reports behind us. The whistling of the shells, which almost grazed our heads, was impressive, and though we knew there was no danger, we instinctively ducked. But we recovered ourselves at once to see what effect they had produced. What a pity! They had fallen a bit short. We distinctly saw 4 small white puffs on this side of the hill, just below the group of German officers. Ah! They didn't wait for another. I saw them make off in hot haste, whilst the troopers stationed behind the stack galloped off the horses. The man with the flag was the last to go, closing the procession with rather more dignity. But in 10 seconds the whole lot had decamped, and the only men we could see were the dragoons of the patrol, who rode back to the ridge at full speed. But just as they reached it, the second battery opened fire, and this time the sighting was just right. 4 white puffs appeared exactly over the spot where the Staff had stood a minute before. 2 of the right and 2 of the left of the stack, and all we now saw of the patrol was 2 riderless horses galloping madly towards the woods. Then the 2 batteries pounded away with a will. When I received orders to resume the forward movement, and my good chasseurs had taken up the pursuit again, the gunners had lengthened their range with mathematical precision, and the shells burst on the farther side of the ridge. I took grim pleasure in imagining what must have been happening there, where, no doubt, the division was drawn up, and whilst I continued to direct my vigilant and expert scouts, I amused myself by picturing the brilliant troopers of the Prussian Guard in headlong flight. End of chapter 4. Recording by FNH. Visit www.bookranger.co.uk